The beautiful voice, the radiant atmosphere. Few people are aware of the harsh reality that lurks beneath the stage lights. The life of Karen Carpenter was not solely one of spectacular achievement, but also a tragedy of isolation and unseen forces that gradually ruined her. Rumors about strained family ties, severe control, and startling secrets have been circulating for years. Her brother and close friend Richard Carpenter has now finally spoken up, revealing the truth about what actually transpired behind the scenes. It's somewhat close because it highlighted Karen's brilliance, my organizing skills, and everyone else's. On March 2, 1950, Karen Carpenter was born in New Haven, Connecticut. 4 years prior, on October 15, 1946, her brother Richard was born. In addition to being uncaring toward one another, their parents, Harold Bertram Carpenter and Agnes Ruhr, also showed little care for their kids. Karen felt like a minor character in the family because of Agnes' obvious favoritism toward Richard. Their father loved music more than his wife did. His extensive record collection, which included rock, pop, soul, jazz, and classical music, had a significant impact on both of his siblings. In addition, he pushed them to start learning music at a young age. Early on, Richard showed great talent, beginning with the accordion and then becoming proficient on the piano. Karen, on the other hand, liked only listening to music and showed no interest in performing. Not until she was a teenager did Karen slowly realize how much she loved singing and playing instruments. The two stayed close despite their share of sibling arguments. Karen was vivacious, enjoyed playing baseball with the local kids, and was frequently selected for teams ahead of Richard, which occasionally irritated him. Agnes's partiality grew increasingly apparent. She continually reprimanded Karen, as though she was to blame for every error, and always stood up for Richard when he was furious. Richard had remarkable piano talents by the time he turned 16. In 1963, the family moved to Southern California, where the music business was flourishing, because they thought their son could pursue a career in professional music. Karen didn't want to part from her pals, but she couldn't influence her parents' choice. Their entire future depended on Richard's career. Richard started singing in clubs in their new home, occasionally concealing his true age because he was still a minor. Karen, meantime, joined the school band out of a desire to escape physical class. This unintentional decision sparked her love for the drums. With Karen on drums and Wes Jacobs, a buddy from school, on bass, Richard Carpenter established the Richard Carpenter Trio in 1965. Richard refused to put Karen's name in the band's title, despite the fact that there were many heated arguments. Nevertheless, the trio's engaging performances soon brought them prominence in the local music industry, performing Richard's original compositions and covering well-known songs. When they landed a record deal with RCA Records after winning a significant music competition in California in 1966, it was their first big break. The timing was still against them. The electric rock tsunami that was sweeping the country was too strong for their gentle jazz style. Soon after, RCA terminated the agreement, which resulted in the group's dissolution. Despite the setback, Richard remained steadfast. He started a brand new band named Spectrum with an emphasis on vocal harmonies. Even yet, they were not fortunate, and Spectrum quickly fell into obscurity. However, Richard made a significant discovery during this period. Not only was Karen a talented drummer, her voice was captivating and incredibly clear. Richard convinced Karen to become the lead singer because he thought it was the secret to success. Karen, then 17 years old, weighed 143 pounds. Roughly 65 kilograms, which was marginally more than the era's ideal of beauty. She became obsessed with weight control after receiving a lot of praises after dieting and losing about 11 pounds, 5 kilos. Their long-awaited chance eventually came in early 1969. A record label received a demo cassette of the siblings from a friend. Karen's vocals quickly captured the attention of Herb Alpert, the well-known trumpet player and co-founder of A&M Records. He made them an offer of a contract right away. Karen's parents had to sign on her behalf because she wasn't yet 21. Richard sang the majority of the lead vocals for the Carpenters' debut album, Offering, which was released on October 9, 1969. However, the record was a failure, and A&M management began to question the pair's ability. Herb Alpert refused to back down when demand mounted to drop them. And from their initial hits to their pinnacle of success, their tenacity cleared the path for the emergence of one of the most recognizable musical groups in history. In addition to being a gifted producer, Herb Alpert was the driving force behind the Carpenters' extraordinary success. Lonnie Hall, a vocalist best known for her endearing duets like Corazon, was his wife. And Camilo Sesto with Katanas. But probably the most significant contribution Alpert made was introducing the Carpenters to the song that would transform their life. They Yearn to Be Near You. Big celebrities like Dusty Springfield, Richard Chamberlain, Dionne Warwick, and even Herb Alpert have recorded the song before. Ironically, none of them had any success with it. Alpert was correct to think that Richard and Karen could change things. The siblings made the decision to attempt it despite their initial reluctance. Close to You became a national phenomenon as soon as it was officially released on May 14, 1970. The song became their first hit, selling 3 million copies in 6 months and peaking at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart on July 25, 1970. Success came after success. Richard got a new concept in late 1970 when he heard a brief song during a TV wedding commercial. 3 months after Close to You's success, he took that short song and turned it into We've Only Just Begun, a song about romantic new beginnings. When the new song was published on August 21, 1970, it caused a stir once more. After Simon and Garfunkel's masterpiece, We've Only Just Begun swiftly rose to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Bridge Across Turbulent Sea. In addition to selling 1 million more copies, the song won them 2 coveted Grammy Awards in 1971. The Carpenters went from being little-known musicians to a worldwide sensation with increasing wealth and recognition in just a single year. Their second album, Close to You, which came out in late August 1970, had both successes. The album gained immediate popularity, solidifying the Carpenters' A-list reputation. Karen didn't stop there, releasing For All We Know on January 15, 1971. Millions of people were moved by the song once more, and it peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. The Carpenters continued to dominate the charts with more hit singles as their career took off. Rainy Days and Mondays, which they launched on April 23, 1971, shot to number 2. The emotionally driven song Superstar quickly rose to number 2 as well, further cementing their place in fans' hearts. Both tracks appeared on their third album, The Carpenters, which was published on May 14, 1971. This was the first record to use the band's recognizable emblem, which would eventually come to represent the Carpenters in an unmistakable way. Despite being the group's soul with her captivating, crystal-clear voice, Karen opted to stay behind the drums during performances, leaving Richard and other musicians to stand at the front. This performance approach was criticized, nevertheless. Richard eventually gave in to pressure from the media and public in early 1971, allowing Karen to take her rightful place in the spotlight. Karen became an unreplaceable star after that, and her genius eventually eclipsed Richard's part. June 19, 1972, marked a turning point in their career, when the Carpenters released Goodbye to Love, a song that revolutionized music in addition to being a commercial success. Richard's inventive fuzz guitar solo, a daring and uncommon technique at the time, was the song's high point. Future ballad styles were made possible by this groundbreaking performance, which made Goodbye to Love famous as the first power ballad. The song appeared on their June 1972 release of A Song for You, their fourth album. Hurting Each Other, which peaked at number 2, It's Gonna Take Some Time, which rose to number 12, and, most significantly, Top of the World, which put the Carpenters back at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 chart, were among the album's subsequent big hits. Their notoriety also extended to the political arena. An important turning point in the Carpenters' career came when President Richard Nixon invited them to play at the White House on August 1, 1972. They were the epitome of the American ideal on stage. However, beneath the glittering lights, the Carpenters' lives were anything but straightforward or perfect, unlike the love songs they sang to the world. Tragedy behind the curtain. Richard Carpenter started taking methiclone, a sedative that was then legal in the U.S., to treat his persistent insomnia. But addiction spread more quickly than he thought, plunging Richard into an unstoppable downward spiral. Later, the movie The Wolf of Wall Street would make reference to this medicine as a sobering reminder of its terrible effects. Karen Carpenter developed an obsession with her weight while Richard battled his addiction. It all began with a snapshot that glaringly emphasized her imperfections and an article that criticized her for seeming a little overweight. Karen was pushed into a hazardous and excessive cycle of weight control by those statements, which pierced her deeply. In spite of his addiction, Richard continued to work. He put all of his energy into music because he thought that by concentrating on Karen's gift, they could get through any obstacle. His perseverance paid off. With the publication of the album Now and Then on May 1, 1973, the Carpenters' supremacy on the charts was further cemented. However, Karen's health started to deteriorate as their career took off. She had shed a considerable amount of weight by 1974. Down to barely 45 kilograms, or 99 pounds. She misused laxatives, concealed food, and her fixation grew more and more intense. Once a young woman full of life and energy, she became dangerously thin and frail. Karen rejected her own issues while urging her brother to pursue treatment. She maintained that stress alone was the cause of her weight reduction. The situation was actually far worse. Anorexia nervosa, a serious and poorly known eating disorder at the time, was what Karen was dealing with. When she appeared in public, she used layers of clothes to hide her skinny body. Few viewers were aware that Karen's health was declining behind the scenes, despite the fact that she looked stunning on stage. The Carpenters continued despite her deteriorating health. Horizon, their sixth album, was released on June 6, 1975. Rumors started to spread in the meanwhile. Many people thought Karen was fighting cancer because of her thin appearance. Karen started using ipecac syrup, a medication that causes vomiting, in a frantic attempt to keep her body trim, which further damaged her already delicate condition. Her family was still ignorant of the full scope of her suffering, though. The Carpenters' career started to decline around 1975. Released on June 11, 1976, their seventh album, A Kind of Hush, fell short of expectations. Nevertheless, with more than 150 million records sold worldwide, they had already made a lasting impression on the music industry. Sweet, eerie, and deeply poignant, Karen Carpenter's voice was hailed as one of the best female voices ever and left a lasting impression on the music business. Even though Karen dated a number of well-known people, fame was unable to satisfy the emptiness in her heart. She never fell in love. Then, in the early 1980s, Karen met Thomas James Burris, who was 9 years her senior and a real estate developer. Karen was mesmerized by Burris's charm and self-assurance when they first met at a fancy restaurant. Nevertheless, there was a harsh reality underneath his polished appearance. Burris was looking for a way out of his debt. After a brief courtship, Burris proposed to Karen, who was emotionally sensitive and easily accepted the partnership. And they intended to tie the knot in the Beverly Hills Hotel's Crystal Room on August 31, 1980. At 30, she thought she had at last found the children and loving family she had always desired. However, her aspirations were dashed a few days prior to the wedding. Burris sarcastically admitted that he was unable to conceive because of a vasectomy. Karen, devastated, sought to call off the wedding, but her mother firmly refused, saying that it was too late because family plans had already been made and invitations had been sent. She made the costly decision to get married because she was desperate for her mother's approval. Burris showed his true colors after the wedding. He foolishly spent thousands of dollars on ostentatious luxury, wasting Karen's money. Even worse, he abused her physically and psychologically, making her life a living hell. Karen filed for divorce after a year because she could take it no more, but the emotional wounds were severe. Karen persisted in her unrelenting quest for thinness in spite of her deteriorating health. In an attempt to speed up her metabolism, she overused thyroid medication and increased her usage of laxatives, taking up to 90 pills every night. Her body slid out of her control the harder she attempted to control it. By 1981, it was evident that Karen needed treatment because her illness could no longer be concealed. She sought medical attention. She went to New York to see renowned eating disorder expert Stephen Levenkron over her family's disapproval. Things appeared to be getting better for a time. However, catastrophe stealthily approached just as hope was starting to emerge. Richard's affirmation and the heartbroken angel. Karen Carpenter's last few months of life were a tragic battle between brittle optimism and hard reality. She sought the assistance of psychologist Stephen Levenkron after struggling with anorexia nervosa for years. Levenkron scheduled a family therapy session with Karen's brother Richard and their mother Agnes after realizing the growing threat posed by her condition. He underlined throughout the session that Karen most needed her family's love and support in addition to medical care. Richard, who genuinely cared for his sister, made an effort to communicate his worries. Karen had always yearned to be loved and acknowledged by her mother, thus her mother's coldness was what wounded her the most. Karen's already frail heart felt like it was being pierced by Agnes' silence. Karen was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital in New York in September 1982 when her health deteriorated to a serious level. In order to assist her in rapidly gaining weight, the doctors there made the decision to start intravenous nutrition therapy. However, this life-saving action had a terrible price. Karen's body could no longer bear the stress of fast weight increase after years of physical depletion brought on by irregular eating habits. Her weakening heart turned like a ticking time bomb that could explode at any second. Karen persisted in pursuing her work despite the mental and physical suffering. Her last performance took place in the multipurpose room of Buckley School in Sherman Oaks, California, on December 17, 1982. Nobody in the room that day realized they were seeing one of the greatest voices in history fade into obscurity. The morning of February 4, 1983, was the day of the last tragedy. Agnes was startled to discover Karen unconscious and fell on the floor of her room. All attempts to save her were unsuccessful, despite the fact that she was taken to the hospital immediately. Her heart had ceased to beat. She was only 32. CBS made a biographical movie about Karen Carpenter's life 6 years later, in 1989. But only a portion of the reality was disclosed in the movie. Agnes and Richard insisted on eliminating information that brought attention to the family's internal strife and Karen's suffering in trying to win her mother's love. Instead of revealing the tragic reality behind the limelight, they wished to maintain the illusion of a glowing Karen on stage. Richard Carpenter became the steward of his sister's legacy, despite his initial reluctance to face the anguish of his loss. He spent years restoring, re-releasing, and remastering the Carpenters' recordings so that new generations of listeners might appreciate their musical genius and emotional depth. Their song not only survived but even resurfaced under Richard's tender care, surpassing the limits of time. Richard started sharing little-known behind-the-scenes tales in addition to conserving their music. He acknowledged in a recent interview that the public was unaware of a great deal about Karen. Her voice was more than just angelic. She was an intense individual who carried a great deal of suffering. Richard provided an honest and insightful look at the unique relationship between the siblings, both as gifted musical partners and as emotional support systems for one another, spanning from the peaceful times of everyday living to the demands of performing in front of an audience. Richard's eventual confirmation of a long-running rumor was possibly the most startling discovery. Suffered tremendous pressure from herself, the music industry, and our family. I watched her slowly shift, but none of us realized how bad things were. It might have been too late by the time we recognized. The 1996 publication of Karen's solo album was one of the most significant turning points in Richard's endeavor to preserve her legacy. Karen finished this project in 1979, but it was never published while she was alive. The CD served as a melancholy window into the creative direction she could have taken had circumstances been more favorable. She never had the opportunity to completely explore the more mature and daring musical style that emerged from each tune, which expressed her own problems and aspirations. Richard admitted that Karen was never given the chance to be herself. She was stifled in her attempts to transcend her pre-existing image and discover new musical horizons. Perhaps things might have turned out differently if her solo record had been released when she was still living. Despite the unresolved sorrow at the end of Karen Carpenter's story, her legacy endures in every note and melody that has warmed the hearts of millions of people. Her voice is still a timeless classic, whether it is used in heartfelt ballads or delicate love tunes. In the realm of music, how do you feel about the turbulent journey of Karen Carpenter? Have Richard's disclosures altered your opinion of her? Please leave a comment below, and remember to subscribe to our channel for more undiscovered tales.